Hello and welcome to the Jerich Show. I'm Javvad Malik. On this week's show, we'll reveal that Erich is actually not a 50-something-year-old man, but actually a 20-year-old girl. And what has the McDonald's got to do with hacking and tractors? And I really messed that up, but let's roll the intro.
Welcome to the Jerich Show, featuring your hosts, Javvad Malik and Eric Krohn. Timely topics, poorly presented.
How you doing?
I'm doing better than you did doing that intro, honestly. You really did kind of botch that, but hey, it's showbiz, right? It's what we do, okay?
It is. Let's go on.
Yeah, I'm a little upset though that you've seen through my intricate disguise and you know that I am not a 40-something-year-old guy. Okay, let's quit throwing it on that end a little bit there, right? But I just I don't know. I thought it would be better if I did it this way.
Well, I suppose there are benefits. I can't think of any.
I can't think of any either.
Like, why would I want to look like Erich?
No, it's interesting though, and the reason that you mentioned that is this rather interesting story. Pardon me, I still have a little COVID in my throat here. This rather interesting story about this Japanese biker, and basically what he did is he put himself out there as a 20 something year old female, and did these face chops. We've talked about deep fakes. You and I we've had talks about deep fakes, and generally when we talked about deep fakes, we talk about the video part, right? Because we're AI and all of that stuff. That's kind of where it goes into the deep fake territory, is where you engage AI. And I'm not necessarily sure exactly what he was doing here, other than in photos, it appears, not in videos, but in photos, basically turning himself into this younger female, because he kind of felt nobody wanted to see a 50-year-old man doing motorcycle stuff. And it seems like he might have been right about that. He had a lot of followers at this point. But what's interesting is he did get called out on this. And some people noticed apparently that at least in one or two cases, she had some very hairy arms.
Yeah.
And the reflection in a mirror was not what they were seeing up front. So obviously these sorts of things can only go so long before they get pulled apart. But it's an interesting use of this, and another lesson in this shocking discovery that the things we see on the internet may not always be true. What do you think, Javvad?
Very shocked indeed. Things I learned today. But I thought it was interesting that it's not a malicious attempt by this person to they weren't trying to steal anything from anyone, but I suppose they were trying to get the clout or get influencer status, I suppose. So in a way, it kind of like borders on that. Well, how far is it to go? But what's really interesting is that he has over about 20,000 followers who are really or she has 20,000 followers, the avatar, the character. And he went on TV, and he actually, when he was called out, and he said, yes, this is it. This is what I do. And, I didn't think people would want to follow me as a 50-year-old man. That she's far more interesting. And maybe I took it a bit too far. But a lot of the followers are still highly supportive of him. And they said, hey, we were following it for the motorcycle news and the maintenance and the track days and the rides and all that kind of stuff. So it's also really interesting how people get. I think it's a bit like how when people get invested in a TV show and certain characters in it, they're not real people, but you just get invested in those characters. So I might be stretching it a bit. Don't give me that look. But I think when you see someone online and that's the only interaction, you build up this mental image of who they are, and you kind of get invested into what they do and how they do it. And when you look at creators, particularly on YouTube, there are two predominant types of categories. One are those that are idea-based creators. So they take an idea and they create a video around that. So the idea could be like, how many ping pong balls does it take to fill up a swimming pool? Or, how much money would it take for someone to, run across a highway? Something like that. That's an idea-based one. And those are really interesting. But you'd watch it regardless of who the creator is. Yeah. And the second type of creator is a personality or a relationship-based creator, where you become invested in the creator themselves, and you would watch them regardless of what they're doing. So here's me mowing my lawn, and you'd be like, oh, this is my favorite YouTube creator, let me watch them. And this is how a lot of them became quite popular. So they could literally, like, they've built that relationship. And so I think in the context of looking at how we judge relationships that people form online, this firmly falls into the category of a relationship-based one, where you're following the person and the personality, regardless of what they're doing. So they could be like, changing out spark plugs on their bike, and that's interesting as look at me riding along these mountain paths. So I took a bit of a dive there. But what do you think about that, Erich? Have you ever thought about creators in that light?
It is interesting, the way that you kind of put that together. And what I was thinking about while you were rambling on nonsensically here was that we all, no matter what we do, right, there's a level of deception in everything we do, whether it's recording, whether it's, like you and I right now, we're both dead tired. But we're not going to come on here and act like we acted in the pre-show, where we're basically just, half dead in our chair. We're going to come out here. We're going to put on a happy face. We're going to throw in some energy. We're going to use every ounce of energy we have left during this show, right? And that's honestly kind of faking it too. It's the level of deception we go to. And it also goes to, what were you selling it as? So you go to a movie, that the characters are fake. And like you said, you can still get into the characters. Look at Star Wars, right? People even get into whiny Luke Skywalker, and that's all he did is whine the whole time, right? Yeah. But people get into that, and they follow those characters knowing that they're not real. So here's the character that they were following. The difference is, and where the real deception here is, and where the level comes in, I think, is that this individual was purporting that they were really who they were at some point, right? So there was some serious deception in that piece. Now, obviously, the content was enough to keep people engaged and get people involved, regardless of who was putting it on, right? So you mentioned the people like, yeah, we're in it for the motorcycles anyways, okay? And it's proof, Jeremy Clarkson is proof that people will follow some people that are just not really nice to look at or be around. Just because of some of the content that they put together, right? But in this case, it looks like the guy got started on it, and it just kind of snowballed into this. Now I don't want to say anything. I'm afraid to say anything until he got called out. But kudos to him for coming up and saying, yeah, that was me, and this is what's going on, and this is why. It makes me not want to hate him as much, but it is still really, really deceptive. So I don't know how I feel about this story. I just ranted like you did.
It is deceptive, but I mean, to quote a great artist of our times, if you don't love me, lie to me. And I think that there is an element where we do seek, or people do seek, escapism to a degree. And sometimes people are well aware of it. It's a bit like magic. It's a magic trick, but you don't really look for how the magic trick is done because you're there to be entertained.
Right.
And there's an element of that, especially I think during this time where I was going to say the lockdown as well, but I think just generally our consumption of media is such online that people want to just have a bit of escapism. They want to get attached to characters, and they'll blinker out any sort of negativity towards it because it might not be real, but it's real to me. Damn it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it would have been a big deal here had the person come out and said, hey, this is a fictional character and we're going to follow this fictional character. It would have been a whole different story. Now, what is interesting about this is the persona that he used is atypical for a lot of that scene, right? Like, I don't know about maybe in Japan, but here we don't necessarily, and I'm not saying it's not seen, but we don't see that many female riders of like sport bikes and things like that, right? And so there's that little bit of tie-in. I used to work with a gal who was all into that, and people would look at her like she's crazy. Like, what do you mean you ride this motorcycle? You know, and it's like, no, it's something that we're just not used to seeing. So there is some allure to that, and some interest in that from that being out of the norm. And I understand what he was saying there, but he could have been a lot more honest a lot sooner. But you know, at least he entertained some people, and you know, if they aren't throwing him out, he can continue doing things under his real persona now and see how that goes. Because obviously, like I said, the content was engaging enough to have people involved.
So how would you have felt if it was him, but younger and digitally enhanced to look a lot more handsome? So imagine like you at 20 years old, again, if you were to do that, would that still a form of deception? But I suppose what I'm getting at is that there's no clear line that demarks that this is crossing the line.
Right. My mind went straight to like Instagram filters, right? So you know, perfect complexion. Oh my gosh, and all those things that go along with it, because yeah, that also is deceptive.
Yeah. Your Honor, I'm not a cat.
Right. Right. No, it's an interesting topic. It really is. And it's an interesting story just in general. And as we get more into this deep fake stuff and we get more into digital imaging, and people using it for different things, I think we're going to see more and more of this kind of stuff.
Yes, we are. So let's bring the tone down a bit. Not the tone, the mood down a bit to something a bit more serious. And I love the headline here. Andy Greenberg at Wired, they hacked McDonald's ice cream machines and started a Cold War. That is just genius. So let's, rather than skimming through the article, I'll just tell you a few of the key points. There are these ice cream machines in McDonald's, and they're meant to be like some automated ones that need less cleaning or other old ones.
Don't break down.
Yeah. But the problem is that these ones are very complex and they break down a lot. Now, if you're a franchisee, you buy stuff through McDonald's approved suppliers, and this machine is made by a company called Taylor. And so every time the machine breaks down, they have to call Taylor, and Taylor sends a Taylor-approved engineer around to fix it at the franchisee's expense, and then they go back. So already it's something that, okay, some people have said maybe McDonald's get a backhander for this, but let's put that aside. Let's say McDonald's don't get a backhander, they're just trying to do business. Even now, you're in a position where McDonald's have no incentive to fix this because there's no money going out of their pocket. It's just some franchisees on some days of the week can't serve ice creams. But for the franchisee, it's highly, not only is it sort of, what's
disruptive?
The word? Inconvenient and disruptive. That's the words I was looking for. But it can be costly. I mean, the machine itself costs $18,000 to buy. So there's another company called Kitsch, and they came out and they made a add-on to the machine. It's got a Raspberry Pi in it and what have you, and it just brings modern functionality in it. And it allows the owners, the franchisees, to actually be able to self-diagnose the issues. So rather than calling up an engineer to come and say, there's this code EF00372, the Kitsch machine will just say, like, press the cone icon, select option 3, reboot, voila, it's all fixed. So this company became a runaway success amongst franchisees. Franchisees started buying these products and paying the monthly subscription fees. Everyone's happy. Taylor was not happy though, because they're losing out on engineer call-out services. So they then called up McDonald's and said, hey, this is going on, we're losing money, why don't you help us out? And this is where it becomes very, very dark and colluded. they tried to first, apparently, according to the article, McDonald's and Taylor teamed up. They tried to get hold of one of the kitchen machines first to try and disassemble it, which they did. And then they produced their own version of it, which in true Taylor fashion was breaking down just as much as the machine was. And then McDonald's started to send increasingly unhinged scare memos, warning that Kitch might steal confidential data and that it creates a potential very serious risk for the crew or the technician attempting to clean or repair the machine. It also went on to say that by using the Kitch machine, the add-on, you could cause serious human injury, and McDonald's strongly recommends that you remove the Kitch device from all machines and discontinue use. So it's basically it's quite a saga that's panning out. It's quite the story, and I think this is one of those cases where, like, you know, it's, you buy something, you own it, and then you're subservient to the manufacturer, or in this case the franchisee as well as the manufacturer, to do things their way, which feels like a really unfair world, is an unfair way to go about business. I mean, John Deere tractors have been having this dispute with farmers for several years now, where, you know, farmers have then been downloading stuff and trying to hack it themselves. And I think this is something that, you know, we, at the broader level, we need to address. I mean, even when you look at phones, I mean, if you have an iPhone, you know, stop calling it side loading when or jailbreaking when you're putting on your own things. You know, that makes it sound something criminal. What you're doing is you've got a device that you've paid for, you own, and you want to install software that you want onto it. You know, why do we treat all these things like an act of rebellion? Sorry, well, I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah, this is where we get into, you know, the argument that you buy the hardware, but essentially license the software, right? So yeah, you've got this chunk of hardware, but if you don't have the software, what are you going to do with it, right? But, you know, it wouldn't be that big a deal, I don't think, if this stuff was covered, let's say, under warranty. And I get the whole, you break the seal, you break the warranty. Okay, cool, fine, whatever. But when the warranty's up, or whenever that service agreement is up, you should have the right to do what you want to that equipment. That's my opinion, right? You own it. But the legalese oftentimes says that you license the software for these things, right? And I love the fact that this third party came in and said, come on, this is ridiculous. Threw up a $35 Raspberry Pi or $45 Raspberry Pi, and has now kind of put a Band-Aid on the issue. And I understand that this annoys the company that makes these machines, which are so reliable that there are hashtags about broken ice cream machines at McDonald's, right? This is not the first time we've heard of this being a major issue. And I totally understand the franchisees need to have their stuff up and running. I mean, how frustrated do people come in? Like, I want an ice cream cone. Not today again. You know, and we've got to wait for this person to fly in or come in or whatever, this engineer to come in and press the cone button and hit 3 and everything works again, right? And reboot. I totally get this. It's a byproduct, in my opinion, of the legal agreements that we get into these days, which nobody ever reads, right? When was the last time you ever read the terms of services, or, you know, the legal agreement on a piece of software when you install it, right? Not even if it's like you have to scroll to the bottom to do it, which is always a hint to me that there's something ugly in there, because they really want to make sure legally that you said you read it. But this is, you know, this is a big argument, and it's something that we're going to see in the future. Now, I could argue, what's the difference between this and, let's say, a crack for certain pieces of software, or, like you said, side loading, which is illegal in some ways or whatever, against the conditions. And, you know, there's all this kind of stuff, but hacking is hacking. Not to put a bad word on it, it's making things do something they weren't initially designed to do. And that's what they basically did here, is they created a hack to get around having to have the engineer come out to kick up the soft serve, you know. And The ultimate funny part about this is you're talking what, $1 a cone or something like that. This is not the big money deal. This is not like the thing you want to die on this hill about, but that's only one piece of it.
But that's why the uptime and availability of these machines is even more important, because rather than having an old-fashioned machine which you have to pay someone at an hourly rate to clean out every day, and it could be costly and what have you, you're relying on that machine to churn out like 30,000 cones a year to make it worth your initial investment.
The $18K that you paid into it, and now you still have to have, exactly. Have you ever seen Bob's Burgers?
No.
Okay, wonderful show, and he has an ice cream maker in there, and there's a few episodes where he's having problems with the ice cream machine, and it's kind of funny though. It just makes me kind of laugh a little bit because it's become such a deal. But ultimately, these are a fairly simple machine. What's it do? It makes it cold and it churns the stuff, and then it pressurizes it and spits it out. We are not talking about rocket science here. This is not a Tesla in the organization, and for them to follow up and come through and say, this could cause a physical harm. I mean, what's it going to do? Go into the defrost cycle and like explode the machine? I mean, seriously, we're not talking about, propane or natural gas or, this is an ice cream machine. Come on.
Yeah. It also reminds me, like a while ago, Sonos, they started bricking their old devices because they're like, oh, it's recycle mode. And they did do a U-turn after there was a, backlash. But it again goes to that whole thing that you just discussing about, you buy the hardware, but you're only leasing the software. And I think this is just something that's really alien to a lot of people, because we're still used to the physical comparisons of things in the old age. You buy a book, that's your book. You can highlight it, you can fold it, you can lend it to people, you can take it back, you can do whatever you want. But now it's quite convenient if you download a digital book for the publisher to say, oh, here's some updates to it. Let's update it, push it to your device. So now you've got the errors all removed from it. But that could also change information, take out stuff, put in more information, and you could also lose access to the thing altogether anyway. So this is do
you remember the days when you would like buy Photoshop and you didn't have to renew a subscription every year, and it probably worked just fine, and you didn't actually have to buy the new version? Okay, and now we're in this subscription model, which sounds all good, but dear heavens, I can actually say I just dealt with this. I bought a vinyl cutter for, our little side gig here that we do some arts and crafts stuff. And this vinyl cutter came with a piece of software. Now, this piece of software is ancient, and I mean old. And it requires actually a USB dongle that you stick in the side for security. Okay. But what I noticed when I was looking for these is so many of them went for sale and didn't include the software. Why? Because that software is a key that's now tied to an email address, and you can never, the person has to go out and buy this software again. So you're buying a $300 vinyl cutter, but to use it, you have to pay another $150 for the software because it's tied to an email address that nobody's going to give up, right? It ends up being kind of funny the way all that stuff works, but we're progressing more towards this sort of thing as we move forward. And it just kind of tied into, in my mind, to how we've seen that progression go from buying software to licensing it and the things that we're running into here as well.
Yeah. And you bring up Photoshop, and actually just last week there was a big hoo-ha where Adobe, people wanted to leave their subscription, and they were stinging them with a leave early cancellation fee. So while it was like, so this is one, someone's being charged $291 early cancellation fee to leave. And again, it might have been in the T's and C's. It might be like you're coming in for a year-long subscription, but it's not really something that people expect. So when they're stung with this, when they're trying to leave, it's very, very shocking. But
yeah, and then you're paying for some, you're paying for something you don't have. It's like the contracts though that you get with satellite services and things like that. I mean, it is in the T&Cs, and you always think, oh, it's not going to be a big deal until it is, and then it really is.
Yeah, that's it. So before we go, I don't want us people to think that we don't give good consumer advice, because when I was looking at the Adobe topic last week when it was breaking, someone shared this really handy graphic, which is Adobe Alternatives, and they have got like free of charge, which is blue dots, and single purchase, which is in yellow dots. So you could get something like Affinity Photo, which is, I
actually use Affinity Designer. Yeah.
Oh, right. Cool. Yeah. So these are Photoshop alternatives, whatever that AI I do. What I don't know.
Adobe Illustrator.
Illustrator. That's the one. So there's all these products that are there, and I was actually looking through these, and there are some really, really good ones here. Erich, are there any ones that you really like out of these?
Yeah, like it.
Okay, no, so maybe not. Anyway, thank you all for joining us for this week on the Jerich Show. I hope you found it useful. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And before Erich tells me off afterwards, you can listen to us on thejerichshow.podbean.com. You can follow us on at the Jerich Show on Twitter. You can follow me and Erich on Twitter. And oh no, that's from last week. Okay, let's ignore that one. Have a great one. See you next week. Bye.